cannabis will most certainly open you to demonic influence. You see, a lot of people get Stockholm Syndrome, where they make excuses for the things that are hurting them. And we can kind of trick ourselves into believing that something is good when it might not actually be. Now, the reason I love cannabis is because it's not one of those things that is so clear-cut right or wrong. It is very much up to debate whether or not it is a good or bad thing. And in fact, in my own experience, it's almost always 50% good and 50% bad. And so I see cannabis and psychedelics in general as neither good nor bad, but rather it is how you approach these substances. But the thing with cannabis and psychedelics in general is that it allows you to become in tune with different dimensions of reality. Now, I'm not sure about the scientific aspect of this, but it appears to me that cannabis slows down your brainwaves. You fall into a bit of a hazy hypnosis, where everything kind of begins melting back into unity. The boundaries of reality are not so clear-cut as when you're sober. And so if you have demons within you, if you have negative attachments, if you have negative trauma, then by smoking cannabis, everything kind of merges back into oneness, and so too, your demons get closer to you. In a way, you become one with your demons, and therefore they have a stronger influence over you. And what you will find is that cannabis can often lead to other addictions. People like to believe that it's safe and that it's non-habit forming, but cannabis was really the only substance that I had an extreme difficulty in letting go of. It was really the one substance that I was most addicted to. And so when people tell you that cannabis is not addictive, they are often just making excuses. Who cares if it's not physically addictive, if it's psychologically addictive? Cannabis for me was always the substance I think that did the most harm. Not because of it itself. The reason it's so dangerous is because there are very good benefits to cannabis. Now, if you are somebody who takes cannabis for health reasons, assuming you're not smoking cannabis, then that is a different story. But in my experience, cannabis allows the free flow of ideas. I'm able to think about things I've never thought of before. It is seductive in that way, where it's easy to convince ourselves that, well, look at all these great benefits. I'm more creative. I feel good. I think more. And for a long time, many months and even years, I tried to convince myself that it was a good thing. But what I realized is that the effects of cannabis brought me too much in my head, and it was generally intolerable being around other people because I simply couldn't enjoy the experience. When you are sucked into your head, into your own mind, with all the ideas and the visuals, you can't be present to what is happening in the external world. So people like to hang out and smoke weed and talk, and I can get by for 20 to 30 minutes before I have the strong sensation to go be alone. And so I never liked smoking with other people because it's very difficult to enjoy the moment. And me being a highly creative person by default, adding more chaos into the situation never seemed exactly all that necessary. And they say that cannabis is not a gateway drug, but more like a gateway to the fridge. And as innocent as that seems, when you eat more than you should, it can only do more harm than good. And so for me, smoking cannabis led to more eating, more laziness. And over time, one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I would be in a downward spiral of death. It's not the things that are obviously dangerous that are the most dangerous. It is the things that on the surface appear not to be dangerous at all that are the most dangerous. Because that is how we get seduced. That is how we get Stockholm Syndrome and convince ourselves that, well, it's not a problem. But what's funny is that for me, my favorite thing about cannabis was always the morning after. That there was always a bit of an extra afterglow in my body, a bit more presence. That was always more enjoyable. So if you wish to continue to smoke cannabis or to consume cannabis, here's what I would suggest based on my own experience, and this is how I approach it for the most part, is that it's not about the action that you take, it's not about the substance, it's about the intention from which you take it from. If you smoke weed to escape reality, it can only have a negative outcome for you. Therefore, if I am to consume weed, I will generally only do it for meditation purposes, because that is where I see the greatest benefit. You can very much dive deeper into meditation with the help of weed. And next, I would first of all examine the quality and the type of cannabis you are consuming. Don't smoke extremely imbalanced, high THC cannabis, because that will tax your system and do more harm than good. You want a balance of CBD and THC and other cannabinoids. Another thing is that, for me, what is addictive about weed is not weed itself, but it's smoking weed. It seems that there is no psychological addiction when it comes to eating edibles or consuming oil, because there's not that same dopamine hit that you get when you smoke weed. And so to avoid the psychological dependence, to avoid getting hooked on the dopamine, because it's not the weed, it's the dopamine. If you want the greatest health benefits, if you want to use it with the best intentions, consume edibles or consume oil. Don't hit the vapes, which I have found to be the most toxic. And even when I smoke cannabis, pure flower, the benefits just aren't all that great. I don't get it. And after trying to convince myself for so long that it wasn't a problem, I always arrived at the same conclusion. That it really is just not for me. Not because I didn't like it. I loved smoking weed. That was the problem. The psychological dependence on it. And so I will probably do a video in the future where I do fasting and consume cannabis oil, because the cannabis oil has the highest health benefits, and when paired with fasting, the body can do the greatest amount of healing. And two, I find that it is undeniable that you are more connected with the spirit world, with the divine, when consuming cannabis. But with that also comes the demonic. However, when you approach the situation with the right intentions, you give yourself the best shot at having the greatest possible experience.